Pixel graphics, deliberately clunky movements, and tricky platforming stand between you and your freedom. On this episode of Indie Stop SpeedPass, are you going to be another victim, or are you willing to take on the Ministry of Broadcast? Saying nothing about its backstory about taking on a regime in a reality show known as The Wall Show, Ministry of Broadcast places contestants through punishing gauntlets. In a genre I've come to been told is called a cinematic platformer, it takes heavy inspiration from classic PC games like Prince of Persia, the original one, the Oddworld series, or Another World, or Out of This World for many Americans that might have confused that title with a soap opera. The graphics go for heavy pixelization, but with a lot of details and animations for most of the scenery and objects. Characters are proportional, but just practically faceless, with very deliberate animations for most of the actions that they take. This can serve as a detriment in some of the gameplay sections where timing and speed is key to survival. You'll have precious seconds to hit a switch or climb a ledge, only to curse angrily as your character makes slow walking adjustments to be in the correct position to do so, and usually causing a cheap-feeling death. Sometimes timing won't be as much of a key as it seems, and the puzzle might be actually simpler than it's required. Still, this deliberately clunky movement will become far more detrimental in later puzzles when the control for a section just isn't as clear as how it should be. Sound will edge towards the realistic, plenty of wind effects, crunching, gunshots, and dogs barking, which will counteract the very low-resolution graphics. Music tends to stay in the background and leaving ambience at the forefront, but it will show up in very specific sections of the game, like the presence of any certain danger or something like a chase sequence, but all of this music will tend to run on very short loops as a result. For those unfamiliar with the kind of games that this game is taking inspiration from, cinematic platformers tend to have deliberately clunky controls. Walking movement is stilted, stiff, and painfully slow. Jumping tends to have a slight delay feel to it, especially when you're performing a vertical jump. Running feels a bit better, but expect a bit of a startup and some slowdown when you decide to stop, as running off a ledge or not getting enough space to hit speed before jumping off a platform is a very common end to missing some of the game's very unforgiving platforming sections. Note that while you can jump fairly far, you can't jump very high, and a fall from too high is stunned movement at best and instant death at worst. At the same time, some contextual commands like button pressing, lever activation, and the classic push and pull can come up occasionally, each with their own very deliberate animations and positioning. So learning how each works can both keep you on your toes or potentially frustrate you to no end. I'm not really 100% clear on what's going on in this game though. Despite the backstory of your character referred to only as Orange or occasionally Shoeless, only placing him in this hellscape for a chance of leaving the country to see his family, you're never really clearly given that background within the game itself. The reality show gimmick and violent nature of the arenas themselves comes across as very brutal, yet you're later shown that most of the people are perfectly fine later on. Half the time the game grants you no option to continue on without some backhanded, dastardly abuse of your fellow contestants, leading the rest of the players to hate you specifically, despite your best efforts to be friendly to everyone once the day is over. There's also a talking crow for some reason. The ending does offer up a few choices, some more hidden than others. I'm pretty sure there's a message here for my dense brain to completely misinterpret, considering I once read Native Son and only figured that the author was really into describing how bad the snowstorm was, so I am not picking up on things to be theory crafting here, especially with the game's massive amount of tonal whiplash, dark or goofy humor, and references strewn about. The curtains are fucking blue as far as I'm concerned. With all that in tow, the overarching nature of an Orwellian oppressive regime is very on the nose as you're buried in bureaucracy, surveillance cameras, all-seeing eyes, propaganda posters, and images of polarizing political figures throughout the game, which I'm sure will make proper fodder for someone's reactionary YouTube video essay. What I can give you is a much more nuanced reaction to how I feel about the game playing as a game, and with that I have plenty of issues that are nibbling at the overall experience. As I have repeatedly stated, with the graphics being very deliberately animated, getting the positioning and timing on certain actions can be frustrating. Grabbing legends to your right, your character has to be facing right, and vice versa. So if you overshoot the ledge by a bit and you have to turn around, you then have to turn back again and face the correct way, or the jump won't do anything. Occasionally you won't be close enough to the ledge, so you'll automatically shift left or right to get into a better position as you press up, taking the control away from you for a small bit. The same can also occur when grabbing objects or using switches. Timing in a lot of situations can feel unforgivingly tight. When you're under a timing restraint, be it a patrolling enemy, a chase sequence, or crumbling platforms, if your character refuses to let go of an object or shifts their position around to grab onto something correctly, either of which can easily give a chasing enemy just enough time to catch you, having to restart doesn't feel all that fun when it unquestionably didn't feel like you were fully in control. Even though restarts are mostly fair, normally not placing you too far back from the last checkpoint, this is not always the case. It's made worse by any situation where you're in a forced dialogue or cutscene before that sequence, forcing you to waste seconds to nearly a minute for the dialogue to advance, or the scripted animation to finish playing out. Skipping dialogue sections is normally assigned to holding down a button. In the case of playing on an Xbox controller, it was X. There are sections where you are not allowed to skip, locking your movement or even forcing you to wait out the entire dialogue tree, no matter how many times you've seen it. Even foreknowledge of situations, like requiring a pass to get past these cops most every night, will not help you as the game is indentured to cutscene triggers. So the pass that you need does not exist and cannot be retrieved until you listen to these asshats grill you for a pass. Did I mention this happens almost every night, and it's one of the dialogue scenes that you can't control or skip? Nobody can skip the police force. Cute, but seriously, shut the fuck up! Woe be to anyone instinctually trying to skip any of these animations or dialogue scenes by pressing the start button. That instantly loads your last checkpoint with no confirmation prompt, and you'll be forced to go through the whole thing over again. Do I hate this game? No. I mean, I got one of their t-shirts with that talking crow on it, and I was always checking back with it, as I enjoyed that demo that I played. But it can frustrate players who keep at it for extended periods of time. It also goes on for a lot longer than you'd think it would, and it seems to overstay its welcome just a bit, without introducing any real new mechanics that keep things fresh. Still, the platforming is an interesting challenge, and the story can spark a lot of discussion, even if I don't want any part in that. With that, caution plus seems fair. I cannot wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone who isn't fully aware what they're getting into, but it accomplished everything it set out to do with the nature of the cinematic platformer. And more than a few of what I would consider its flaws stem more with the nature of the genre than any faults in the game's development. If you're clamoring for something like the oldest school version of Prince of Persia, by all means it might be what you're looking for. Just do not expect something as fluidly controlled as Limbo or Inside if you're looking for a new puzzling platformer.